Is everybody ready? Yes. Mr. Keeley, good to see you. Thank you for inviting my friend to invite me. Believe it or not, he didn't invite me.
Not surprised.
Yeah. But thank you for that. I found that actually quite amusing. All right. Good afternoon. Thank you for being here. This is a press availability in response to a few press inquiries in relation to what happened this morning, which I understand, pardon me, I didn't watch it, I was working, but I understand to have been a, how shall I put it, simulated hearing supposedly about crime in Philadelphia, actually about an election that's coming in November. And let me just say this. I want to give my personal thanks to Jim Jordan and to Matt Gaetz for coming to Philadelphia, because when you come to Philadelphia, you're going to find out, and in November, they're going to find out. We are here essentially to provide information at the request of the media in relation to that hearing, and also, of course, to present the balance, the counterpoint that the people who organized the hearing didn't want, which is why they sculpted the hearing only to include essentially next to no data and certain witnesses rather than a list of witnesses actually reflective of Philadelphia and what is occurring in Philadelphia. I want to be very clear about one thing, though. I will not criticize any survivors, co-survivors, victims. If there are factual questions about things they may have said, certainly we want to be factually accurate. That's part of our job in the DA's office, is to tell the truth and tell it all the time. But I will not, under any circumstance, be critical of people who have suffered terrible losses and who are expressing themselves as they have every right to do. Those who work in the Philadelphia criminal justice system and in the government look at data and numbers daily. I actually look at the Philadelphia Police Department's publicly available data, which anybody can access from their cell phone. And I encourage all of you who are interested to do that. I look at it usually 2 or 3 times a day to check various things. But the reality is, for many people who live in Philadelphia, they're not checking that data. They may not be interested. They may not know exactly how to interpret certain parts of it. But what they are reacting to is how they perceive crime. And perception is much more a reflection of what may be happening in your family or in your block or in your neighborhood, or it may simply be things that someone said to you and you don't even remember who it was, or it may be entertainment or journalism they're responding to that is understandably focused on a true terrible incident, but less likely to report how that true terrible incident fits in with a larger pattern. Is that a pattern of improvement? Is that a pattern of things getting worse? And so we find ourselves in a kind of a very interesting moment in the United States and in Philadelphia. In the last 4+ years, during the pandemic, we experienced the highest increase in certain kinds of violent crime in U.S. history, and we have experienced the biggest decrease in certain kinds of violent crime in U.S. history. This is the context, and this is part of the reason that I think it can be difficult for people to understand exactly where we are. We will talk about that in a little bit more detail, but what I will ask, and I'm asking this of Philadelphia, I'm asking it of the media, I'm asking it of anybody who cares about the truth, which of course does not include Mr. Jordan or Mr. Gaetz, but for anybody who cares about the truth, I'm asking you to hold 2 truths at the same time. The first one is that statistically there is no question that crime is getting, well, let me phrase it this way. Statistically, there's no question the public is getting safer. We are seeing very, very substantial increases in crime, and not just today, but for years. But at the same time, the perception for many people is that it is not getting better, or maybe even that it is getting worse. I hope there's also a perception that law enforcement and government are working together, as we have, that we must continue to work together, as we are, and we have to keep doing this until every Philadelphian feels safe in their neighborhood. That's exactly what we are doing, and I'm not the first one to say this. You've heard this from Commissioner Bethel. You've heard this from Mayor Parker. You've heard this from Sheriff Bilal. You've heard it from federal government, community-based, faith-based partners that we have. We have to, on the one hand, be encouraged by what we see in the data. But on the other hand, we have to never forget that there are people, even when society is getting safer, who have suffered horrific losses, who have suffered terrible losses, who will be affected by it forever, and that we have to do everything we can to respect and to support them and to protect them in different ways. So let me at this time briefly acknowledge some of the great people who are here today. We have with us Kimberly Burrell, that's B-U-R-R-E-L-L, a co-survivor of gun violence. We have Tree Williams, spelled the way you would expect. Tree Williams is also a co-survivor of gun violence. We have Chester Holman, and that is Chester, H-O-L-L-M-A-N. Did I get that right, Mr. Holman? Okay. And we have Curtis Crossland, and that is spelled C-R-O-S-L-A-N-D. We have Suave Gonzalez, all three of whom are, in a sense, victims of a system of mass incarceration that sometimes fails to separate the innocent from the guilty, fails to come with a sentence that is appropriate or constitutional. We also have with us State Senator Sharif Street of the 3rd District, who has done about everything you could possibly do to try to make Philadelphia safer, and that is not limited to his incredible work on proper funding of public schools, which are a very important crime fighter. It is also due to a lot of his incredible work around having reasonable gun regulation in a state where that regulation is next to none and completely unreasonable. We have with us Imam Kenneth Nurdin of the Philadelphia Masjid. Many of you are very familiar with what has occurred recently with the Philadelphia Masjid, the good and the bad, frankly. And I also want to thank all of our additional survivors of violence, faith-based, community-based, elected government, law enforcement partners who are here today. And I also want to give a shout out to Reverend Holston, who was able to assist us once we got requests for press availability and bringing people together rather quickly. It is my pleasure at this time, first, to call upon Imam Kenneth Nurdin, who has a few words on the topic, and then I will come back up and introduce additional speakers. Imam Nurdin.
Good afternoon, and here we are again. I am Kenneth Nurdin. I'm the resident imam of the Philadelphia Masjid. I'm also a 74-year citizen of Philadelphia, so I've seen cycles come and go. I'm also a Vietnam veteran, so I can speak from that perspective of what gun violence is, and even though we may have a perspective of that, but it's not as bad as you may think on a day-to-day basis. But really, what I would like to say is the main thing that I have seen the criticism of D.A. Larry Krasner, as they call him a progressive district attorney. And, you know, progressive means he's making progress in the natural vernacular. And the progress can be seen in data. We have seen cycles that seem to now be trending in a manner that's never manageable, but it's something that should bring relief if we look at the data just from a purely scientific perspective. And the relief really comes from the engagement of the community, because this is not an issue for the police department, for law enforcement, or for criminal justice. It's a community issue. And so when you bring the community in, it means that you have more in your toolbox than just a hammer. And this is sometimes what many people think all you need to fight crime is a hammer. The DA sees it differently, and he has involved various components of the community in an infrastructure that not only will help to prevent crime, but also give attention to the victims of crime. So I would like to say this to those from the Judiciary Committee who came today. Philadelphia is a city that is relatively peaceful, and they seem to come like pyromaniacs starting fires so they can get attention, and then they're going to blame us for maybe having inadequate infrastructure, and we're the cause of the fire. But they have come in to start a fire because they know it gets attention. So I'll say this just in brief. We have full confidence in the DA, not because of what he says, but because of what he has done. And with what he has done, we'll just say this to those who have doubt. Just keep your eyes open, but as the DA said, look at the data and be aware that perception, if you just look at one component, you get the wrong perception. Step back and look at the total picture, and you'll see a trend that is leading to a solution to not ending crime, but responding to it in a manner that's humane, so that we can really begin to come up with some long-term solutions and how we can better use resources that are dedicated to criminal justice, to law enforcement, but it also be, some of it should be dedicated to community involvement, because this is where the solution really lies, in the intersection of all those components. So again, I can speak for, I'll just say, 74 years of experience in Philadelphia, that this is one of the best DAs that we have seen. He has our full support, and we'll continue to support him. And if you have any doubts, just open your eyes and look at the data. Thank you.
Thank you, Imam. It is now my pleasure to call forward I'll answer the mayor's call later. It's now my pleasure to call forward Kimberly Burrell and Tree Williams, who are survivors of gun violence. I will not tell their story. I will let them tell it, but I would ask them to come forward together and then speak for as long as they would like to speak.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Tree Williams, victim of gun violence by my baby boy, who was killed December 10th, 2017, Terrence T.A. Williams, at the corner of Westmoreland and Royal. My son was in the streets doing the work of juvenile advocacy. My son was in other states and cities doing the work of juvenile advocacy, juvenile incarceration, juvenile imprisonment in adults' prisons. When my son was killed, Ovita Johnson was immediately by my side. Ovita Johnson is working with Larry Krasner for the victims, and she was by my side through everything. Mr. Krasner sent his condolences, and she told me personally that she spoke with him about anything that he could do. I believe his job here in Philadelphia is not going to be to make violence with the guns. Mr. Krasner, I do believe, is not selling the guns. Mr. Krasner is here, and I have been a witness of him trying to prevent, trying to find solution, as Mr. Iman said, and supporting the victims like myself and Ms. Kimberly. So with all these umbrellas he got under this to give us that support that we need the city of Philadelphia to back them and us and our citizens of the gun violence. Thanks.
Hi, my name is Kimberly Burrell, and I just want to say in 2009, I became a victim. There's been several administrations prior to the Krasner administration, and it wasn't until he came into office that I became a survivor. I've never known another district attorney's office to bring in survivors to help. I serve on the CBAC program, which gives the DA's office information on how we can better change. That's inviting victims in. I'm no longer silent. That's a powerful thing when a mother who loses her child to gun violence finds her voice. I speak for my son. I speak for my other son who is suffering from PTSD because of the lack of help that I did not receive before this administration. So when you say what he's not doing, ask me what he is doing. He gave me a voice that I did not have. Again, I will say it again. Every Saturday during the pandemic, I hit the streets to try to prevent other young men from committing these crimes. If that's not a person, if that's not an administration that is helping, you tell me what you call it. I have watched the numbers drop. And I feel happy and supported that I'm allowed to be a part of that. There's nothing more powerful than being a part of something that is the solution. I will never get my son back, but I can again, like I've been saying for the last 14 years, I can help another mother not go what I go through. Thank you, Larry. I appreciate you for inviting us in, not blocking us out, not letting us see that, oh, that's the DA. It's an inviting environment for us to come to a solution as one group of people. And I ask anyone who challenges that, what are you doing to help? What I do is I'm in the streets. That's what I do. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tree and Kimberly. I really appreciate it. Victims come in more than one kind. And so I'm going to call forward 3 people who are not necessarily victims of gun violence, but they are victims of mass incarceration that was not willing or interested in telling the difference between innocent people and guilty people, and was not willing or interested in making sure sentences were proportionate and even constitutional. Chester Holman and Curtis Krasner are innocent men who did decades in prison. And they did decades in prison because certain police officers and certain prosecutors didn't do their jobs. They didn't do it right. They didn't even, in my opinion, care whether they did it right. Suave Gonzalez was a juvenile lifer who spent a lot of years believing he would die in jail because the sentence he was given for a crime he did commit was unconstitutional, as it was later determined. I would like to invite all 3 of these men to come forward and to say what they would like to say as victims of a system that did them harm.
Good afternoon. My name is Chester Holman. I watched some of the hearing this morning, and I listened to some of the victims, families of the police officer who were killed, and there was victims there, and there's victims here, mothers who actually lost their sons, and not to demean any victim whatsoever, but I just think any loss of life equals out to the same, and it's death, and sadness, it's hurt, it's pain, you know, it's suffering, and you know, even though I stand here alive, you know, I was accused of a crime that I didn't commit, and I spent 28 years of my life in prison. And in that process, I lost the most dearest person that I've ever known, and that's my mother. And you know, I never thought I was going to get out. And this administration here changed that for me. I never thought I'd come back in this building, to the DA's office, because this is the place where it all began, where my life was stolen and was taken. And my anger, I don't want to say my hatred, but my anger and frustration towards the city, towards the you know, the previous administrations, the police, it just, you know, I mean, how can you not be mad when someone stole your life and it's caused so much pain to your mother and your family? And Mr. Krasner and his administration here, I want to say, has restored my faith in the system, so to speak. It's still difficult, but I know that it's going in a different direction, a better direction. And you know, I'm just thankful for Mr. Krasner, you know, and what he's done, and allowed me to move on with my life, so to speak, and picking up the pieces. So to this administration, Mr. President, I'm very grateful, very grateful. You know, like I said, I stand here alive and breathing, but my spirit and my soul was crushed. It was killed. And for the last 4.5 years that I've been home, I've been trying to like breathe life back into myself. And you know, I know I've been very different, but like I said, when you just think you're going to die in prison, it's, you know, I mean, what else do you have? So I just thank you for all that you've done and for breathing life back into me, so to speak, and allowing me another chance to finish out my days, so to speak, as a free man, a rightful free man.
Good afternoon. My name is Curtis Krasner. I served 34 years in prison for a crime I did not commit. This June will be 3 years that I've been home. I went in at the age of 27. I came out at the age of 60. I was a husband, a father of 5 kids, worked as a therapist assistant, on my way to college to be a therapist. Great job opportunity, great future in front of me. Young wife, 23 years of age, trying to do all the right things, a promising future. Then I was falsely accused of a crime that happened 4 years prior to my arrest, somewhere around there. And I filed 9 state post convictions, 5 federal petitions. I knocked on many doors, many doors, many doors. Finally, you know what I'm saying, when the court finally did acknowledge that we have a problem, we have to hear this case, they assigned the federal defenders to represent me. And I shared to say that had it not been for this administration, no other administration would give my records. I've never seen any of my records. I've never even had an attorney to visit me. In the county prison or in the state prison, I was just taken a complete advantage of. And when you're poor, you're indigent, you don't have that help, you don't have that assistance, all you got is your faith. If you have faith in God, all you have is your family support. Had it not been for this administration to have an open policy, a policy of transparency, to say that we will give records and if it's wrong, we will correct it. As a result, today, I'm here. Thank God after 34 years. I do thank the district attorney's office. I actually work here at the district attorney's office. I'm on the community engagement unit. I have an opportunity now to be amongst kids and healing circles with kids. Have the opportunity to visit schools and to talk to kids, to offer them that love, that help, that support. We do that. We march. I have actually marched in the street with children, hands up, guns down. My grandkids, 4 of my kids actually left the state of Pennsylvania because of the violence that was here and wanted to give my grandkids an opportunity to live. So when I take this job here, I could be angry and be mad, but this is not that administration. I would rather be trying to save another child, that another family would not have to leave this great city of Philadelphia. As my family felt pushed out, a lot of families felt like they really want to leave. So I do thank this administration for what it has done. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
My name's Suave Gonzalez. I spent 31 years as a juvenile in prison because I was hanging with somebody that committed a crime. The person that actually committed the crime got less time than me. But I'm not here today to talk about that. I'm here today to talk about what we're doing to contribute to public safety as juveniles. As a juvenile lifer, I came home, recorded a podcast, became the first formerly incarcerated person to win a Pulitzer Prize and an International Documentary Award, which is like the Oscar in podcast. I got to say that for a reason. Because I went to prison with an IQ of 56, couldn't read or write. Today, I am a success coach at community college, where we offer people impacted by the justice system on both sides the opportunity to come to school. That's what I do today. I have 100 students, all impacted by the system. Not one has reoffended. This is what we're doing to contribute to the public safety of the city with the help of this office. So a lot of time you hear conversations, Larry is letting criminals go. Define that for me, because we're not out here reoffending. We out here giving back to our community. That's what we're doing. And until I hear neighboring states doing what we're doing, which is giving formerly incarcerated people that's been impacted by the justice system, the opportunity to come to school, rebuild their life, and contribute to the community, then you can't talk about crime in the city. Because actually, we are contributing to lowering crime in the city. Thank you.
Gentlemen, thank you. I do want to make sure you all caught, because these are three interesting men. I want to make sure you caught that when Curtis was talking about how he got locked up and went to jail, he was in a house with the mother of his children, and there were 5. He was working, he was studying, and he was in his early 20s. And he went away till he was 60 for a crime he didn't commit. When you hear Suave Gonzalez saying he won a Pulitzer, I know, you might think he's crazy. He won the Pulitzer. He won the Pulitzer for the #1 podcast on Apple, which he did with the journalist Marie Hinojosa. And Suave is all about trying to do the right thing, to make the right thing happen out here. There is no more compelling story about a truly innocent person locked up for 28 years than Chester Holman. If you haven't seen that story, and there is some good television around it, you should. It is now my pleasure to call forward, as voice of the community, two very respected and very, very effective community activists and friends, and they are Tanya Bah, B-A-H, and Cass Green.
So this dataless misuse of official time, money, and influence is messy and disturbing. To exploit survivors in the way that this is being handled right now calls for a forensic audit and possibly a hearing on those that are using their influence and power incorrectly. And quite frankly, as a voter and native Philadelphian, it is harmful to know that this is being able to happen on a regular basis, time and time again here in Philadelphia.
Good afternoon, everybody. I just wanted to follow up on what Tanya Ba just said, and also say, being very familiar with this prosecutorial office here under the direction of DA Larry Krasner, that this is a holistic office. It cares about not only the victims, it cares about the survivors, it cares about the youth. I actually had the privilege of just leaving a youth summit with our juvenile diversion department here at the DA's office, which was funded by PCCD, to work with providers of children who have interacted with the criminal justice system and give them second chances. Just like our other fellow members here today are talking about second chances. When we think about that this has a CARES department that goes out to the victims immediately when the crimes happen. So to say that this office does not care about our community is a complete falsehood and a lie. And so I'm here today to just lift up the holistic environment that we have here, the privilege that we have in Philadelphia, of having a holistic prosecuting office is something that we don't need anyone else to tell us how to do that. We are working in community collectively together with all areas of law enforcement, with our community, with our stakeholders, to make sure that we do what's best for our neighborhoods and our community. And as it was said yesterday, we see the evidence of that over the last couple of years, and we look forward to even more of decreasing crime in our communities and working together to make sure we have safety from a holistic, comprehensive, solution-based method and not just rhetoric.
Thank you so much to Tanya Cass-Green. It is now my great pleasure to call forward State Senator Sharif Street. I don't think there is anyone in the Senate. We have some great Philadelphians in the Senate, but I don't think there's anyone who has done more than Senator Sharif Street to support public safety, to push back against crime, to try to bring gun violence under control, to support prevention in ways that make an enormous difference. It is my honor and pleasure to call forward State Senator Sharif Street.
Thank you, D.A. Krasner. So today, the U.S. House Judiciary Committee came to Philadelphia. What did they talk about? What didn't they talk about? Well, there were a number of victims who testified, and victims, as D.A. Krasner talked about, it's always tragic, and I certainly know enough about that given the things that have happened in my life with relatives and friends who've been murdered. But it's the role of the Congress not to prosecute cases. The role of the Congress is to create policy. And we heard from Ceasefire PA, and they specifically talked about the fact that ghost guns are a problem. Yet this congressional majority, Chairman Jordan, has not talked about bringing up laws to regulate ghost guns. Ghost guns, for those who don't know, you can buy 3 parts of a gun, click it together in a matter of minutes, if not seconds, and then have an unregistered gun that can be sold and transferred in a way that gets in the hands of folks and results in death across the board. They did not talk about red flag laws. Red flag laws have been cited. Adam Garber talked about it, but we didn't hear Chairman Jordan talk about a time frame for bringing up a bill about red flag laws. Red flag laws are real simple. If you know that a person is likely is mentally unstable, you should be able to go to a judge and have that person's access to firearms removed, so that they don't commit the mass shootings that we've seen around the country, they don't kill themselves, that they don't harm someone else. It presents homicides and suicides. They didn't talk about, there was no time frame for dealing with that. They're armor-piercing bullets. And to talk about the death of police officers, which are horrible and tragic, people who have to run towards the gunfire, we thank them for their service. But on the streets in North Philly and across the country, they call armor-piercing bullets cop killers. And how could a Republican majority who claims to care about police officers not ban bullets known on the streets as cop killers? It's, as a person who has law enforcement officers in my family, as a person who lives in a community where violence takes place in many cases, that should be banned. There's no place for it. They also didn't talk about that we should be funding education. Suave Gonzalez talked about when he was young, the lack of an education. He didn't talk about that. The capital investments that have been proposed in fixing up school buildings need to take place. They didn't talk about putting more money in that. In fact, they criticized President Biden when he's wanted to invest in those communities. They didn't talk about all the social determinants of violence. We know violence is more correlated with poverty than anything else. No, but they've criticized the investments that were made to deal with anti-poverty programs. And finally, what they did talk about was bringing back the antiquated policies of the 80s, where we had mass incarceration, we had sentencing disparities, and the people that they talked about who were released as a part of the Victims Integrity Unit, the Integrity Unit, the Prosecutorial Integrity Unit, I'm sorry. Those folks were committed during a time for all our young people out there who talk about the days when we were locking up everybody when I was young. they want to bring back, they criticize that. They criticize releasing people who we later found out were actually innocent. They found out they would have men and women who did not commit crimes spend their life without jail. They would have juveniles spend their life without jail. And what that does is erodes the confidence of people in the criminal justice system. And one of the things we need that has been part of how the district attorney has been able to reduce crime is that the people of Philadelphia who elected D.A. Krasner have confidence in him and are therefore much more willing to cooperate with police officers and the district attorney's office. Try prosecuting a case if the community sees you as an invader, sees you as someone who they can't trust. It's not easy to prosecute cases if the community doesn't trust the prosecutorial office. So I conclude with this. D.A. Krasner is bringing down crime in Philadelphia. D.A. Krasner is doing his job. But the question is, when will Jim Jordan and Matt Gaetz do their job? When will the United States Congress, House of Representatives, pass background checks, red flag laws? When will the United States Congress ban ghost guns? When will they restore the assault weapons ban? When will they take weapons of war? When will they make sure that little children in suburban communities don't have to do active shooter drills hiding under desks? And when will they make sure that in communities like mine, children don't go to sleep every night hearing gunfire from guns that were purchased legally? And I call on the United States Congress to do it, in the House of Representatives where the Republican convention is holding it up, and I call on my colleagues in the Democratic State Senate to do the same thing, where we have guns that the Democratic House has passed and the Republican Senate is holding up. They are failing us in Harrisburg, they are failing us in Washington, and now they try to deflect from that by criticizing a DA that's doing his job. They need to do theirs.
Thank you, Senator, and thank you for all you do. So I was not able to watch this hearing. I was actually doing my job, which is to fight crime. It appears my job is also to fight stupid. So I'll just keep fighting crime and fighting stupid all at the same time. But what we are witnessing, and we've seen things like this in other cities, and we've seen things like this before in Pennsylvania, frankly. What we are witnessing here is essentially a war on the truth. I have been briefed on what was said. For those of you who saw it, did you hear data? If you did, was it a lot? Or was it just a little? And was it even accurate? Were people telling you the truth? Or was this a war on the truth? Let's start with the first notion here. Jim Jordan cares about victims. Really? Okay. So, get out your phone, do a little internet search for Jim Jordan. What are you going to find about Mr. Jordan who says, I care about victims? You're going to find that when he was the assistant coach of the wrestling team at Ohio State University for 8 years, he had a colleague who was sexually violating students. The Ohio State University eventually paid $60 million for the abuse of almost 250 of them, and there were approximately, if I read it correctly, 170 of these 260 people who were wrestlers. He was the assistant coach for 8 years. He claims that even though a university investigation showed that there were at least 20 different people who knew what this sexual predator was doing, he claims he didn't know, or at least he said that until 10 different wrestlers much later in life came forward and said, A, he knew. One of them even described a conversation with him in which that young wrestler told Jim Jordan about how he had been violated, and Jim Jordan said to that young wrestler, it's got nothing to do with me, at a time when he could have shielded and protected other victims of those crimes. All 10 of those wrestlers, including one who said he liked Jim Jordan as a coach, came forward and said he was unfit to be Speaker of the House, that he had dug in on lying about what he knew and the fact that he did nothing. Does that sound like someone telling you the truth when he says he cares about victims? Or we could talk about Matt Gaetz. Matt Gaetz, I guess, is feeling better that after the Department of Justice looked at the allegation that he had paid for sex with a 17-year-old while he was a congressperson. The DOJ has not yet brought charges, but he is under an ethics investigation, and the person who allegedly provided that illegal sexual relationship for money is going to jail for his crimes. Sound familiar? Somehow the ones who are not elected are going to jail, and sometimes the ones who are elected have a little Teflon all over them. Well, as long as we're bringing up Donald Trump, let's not miss that these two people who claim that they care about victims have a role model. And that role model is Donald J. Trump. I could go into his list of crimes, but there are so many different categories, and it goes on for such a long period of time. So someone please help me here. If you care deeply about victims, what about the 5 police officers who died as a result of the insurrection that Matt Gaetz wants to deny was a crime and Jim Jordan wants to deny was a crime, an insurrection in which some people believe they were at least a little involved? What about that? Does that sound like someone who cares about crime? Does that sound like someone who cares about victims? Does that sound like someone who cares about police officers who are killed by other people? Those two sat in the center of this table for this supposed hearing. Speaking of the war on the truth, a war on the truth, so right now in Philadelphia, the level of homicides is lower than before we were in office. That's a fact, right now. Did they mention that at the hearing? Right now in Philadelphia, what we are seeing is actually similar to what we have seen for the last quarter century. And what we are seeing is that the level of murder in the states represented by Mr. Gaetz and Mr. Jordan, the red states, is much higher than it is in the blue states. Pennsylvania at this time is a blue state. How much higher? Well, over the last quarter century, 23 years, the murder rate in the red states was 24% higher than the average murder rate in the blue states. During the pandemic, the discrepancy got even worse. You were 40% more likely to die by homicide in a red state during the pandemic than in a blue state. Gee, I wonder if that has something to do with the enormous gun buy that Mr. Jordan and Mr. Gaetz and their MAGA party facilitated. I wonder if it has something to do with that. That was not in play in this discussion because the facts do not help when it comes to the position that Mr. Jordan and Mr. Gaetz are trying to take at this time, a position that is without question at war with the truth. If we look at a much simpler position, what has this office done for victims and survivors? Just a couple facts. When we came in, there were 26 people in the office providing victim services and support. There are 50 in 2024. When we came in, there was no such thing as the CARES unit, which is a unit that specializes in helping families of homicide in the first 45 days after the homicide itself. Well, it exists. It has been funded. It has been refunded. It has assisted 226 people who accepted services and 25 more who declined additional services. And when it comes to relocation, this office has gone from supplying $165,000 worth of relocation, protection, and support to supplying $893,345 this year, and we are requesting $1.25 million for the next fiscal year to make sure that we can dig deep to supply the kinds of protection and services that are necessary to make sure witnesses are safe and victims are safe. What I just told you is the truth. What I just told you are facts. And what you saw at this hearing, a hearing where the people behind me were not permitted to speak, where the people behind me were not invited to speak, where I was not invited to speak despite asking for that invitation, what you are seeing there is political theater. That political theater, in my opinion, will backfire. In my opinion, the arrival and the presence of people like Matt Gaetz and Jim Jordan will only drive out the votes that they're trying to erase and that they are trying to crush. It is my opinion that they would be doing one of the candidates, President Joe Biden, a great service by coming back and by doing this again. Because in my opinion, every time they show up, each of them is worth another 10,000 votes for Joe Biden. So even if they won't invite me to come to their hearing, I'm inviting them not only to come back to Philadelphia, but to come back, let's do a debate, let's do a sit down, let's do a talk. I'll bring my facts, you bring your falsehoods, and let's let Pennsylvania decide. Thank you very much. Are there any questions?
Sir, were you tempted to go uninvited and show up, either as a member of the audience or to ask in person, can I talk to you guys while you're here in Philadelphia?
I was tempted, but I have this thing which is fighting crime that I do, and it actually occupies even more time than political theater. If there was the slightest hint that I actually would have had the opportunity to address any of these questions or correct any of these sculpted, untrue or half-true things that were put out there, I would have been more than happy to do it. But as you know, Mr. Keeley, because you were kind enough to tag Jim Jordan on your social media posting, I was ready, willing, and able to come. He forgot to call me.
From the part that I watched, one statement, when it came to the data, somebody said, and I'm sorry I don't know the exact person, it was I think it was one of the victims of the police officers that were killed, family members, said, of course the data shows the crime's down when you're not prosecuting crime. That's what that was said. I don't know, what would you say to that?
Well, it's unfortunately, that's a deep misunderstanding of how crime statistics are kept. Crime statistics are not how many arrests have been made, and they're not how many cases have been prosecuted, and they're not how many convictions have you gotten. They're how many incidents of crime are reported. So those concepts are completely unrelated. The data I am reporting comes from the Philadelphia Police Department, or it comes from other counties, most of them large cities, that report their data into central databases. It comes from the Federal Bureau of Investigation. It comes from the United States government. And frankly, only a member of QAnon would think that data is not reliable. With all of the qualifications, we all know certain crimes are underreported some of the time, homicide not really being one of them, but we all know that certain crimes are underreported. So I would respectfully suggest, no, that has nothing to do with it.
Mike, and the only reporter here? All right.
You're the only reporter to me.
I'm sorry. All right. I've talked to you about this on the last day you voted for yourself. I think I'm 6 weeks
Now,
old.
how do you know I voted for myself?
Oh, I would think that, but maybe. But I'm a little older than you, and I talk to you. I consider retiring every day. You got people that do not want you going anywhere. Here's your chance.
I don't think you're older than me. I think you're younger than me, Steve.
You're born in March, right?
Yeah.
February.
Same year?
Same year.
Oh, no kidding. We might have been in the same nursery. This is awesome.
Well, the question I have is, we at this age consider retiring. These people obviously don't want you to go. I just want to give you the chance to tell both the people that are against you, that would want you to go, and the people that don't want you to go anywhere, are you running for re-election?
That is something that I will announce probably early next year, but certainly after Jim Jordan and Matt Gaetz make sure they know how to say President Joe Biden.
Are you leaning towards staying?
You know, I love this job. I love Philadelphia. I think any sane person would lean towards staying, but like you, I'm not brand new. Even though you look younger than me, I'm not brand new.
On the inside. Lastly.
Did you say dying on the inside?
No, I said not on the inside. And lastly, would you consider actually sitting down with them either privately or publicly and talking to your critics? Or we talked yesterday about the appearance of Mr. Fitzgerald. That was the other thing today, that it's already a decision made that you will not seek the death penalty. They're under that impression. Has that decision been made? And if not, can you explain to the public how that decision gets made?
So, number one, no, the decision has not been made. We follow a process that is very similar to the process that was followed by prior administrations. We have a committee of people who are extremely experienced, not just with criminal justice, but also with homicide cases. Many of them have themselves decades of experience, who consider in appropriate cases, whether or not the death penalty should be applied. Some of these gatherings are lengthier than others. In relation to the Fitzgerald family, it is a lengthier gathering, partly because in my first meeting with the Fitzgerald family, they started to express to me why they believe that that outcome is appropriate. And at that time, I said to them, you know, I would rather, I mean, I can just explain to this committee what you're saying, but I feel like it would be more compelling and fairer to you for you to be invited to make your own argument to this committee, which they agreed to do, and then they asked to do it in person, which we agreed, and then they asked for us to pay to fly them so they could do it in person, which we did. They came. We spent less than 3 hours, I think 2 hours and 45 minutes, with three members of the family who are very, very close to the victim in this case, expressing themselves in great detail. But we're not done. We have to also hear from the defense. We have to find out whatever psychological and other reports have been done for this defendant, who it was early 18 when the event occurred. And once we have all of that information, then the members of this group, who collectively will comprise literally hundreds of years of experience with homicides, will discuss whether we should pursue the death penalty or not. So we are in that process. We will probably have an outcome, I would say, in the next couple of weeks. But as you know, I explained to them when they were here, that is the next step in the process, and we don't make decisions before we have all the information. We have to have all the information. All right. Okay. Are there any other questions? Have a wonderful weekend.